My little brother doesn't know he's adopted, and I can see him struggling to connect with our family. I want to tell him, but my parents are threatening to disown me if I expose the truth. Posted by you/Classic Advance 5115. I am 26 years old. I don't live with my parents, but I had a great relationship with them, as well as with my little brother, Moses. Moses doesn't have a great relationship with our parents. He's never really had a good relationship with them. I don't fully understand why, but from what I can gather from my research, adopted children, even those who were too young to remember, can still have mental blocks and trauma that prevent them from forming full relationships with their adoptive parents. Moses is 13 years old, and we are so close that he spends most of his weekends at my house. His school breaks up for summer in a week, and he's already told me he wants to spend the first fortnight with me at my house, something our parents don't care about. When he's home, there is constant fighting between them. I'm sure some of it is due to his teenage hormones and possibly some of it is related to what I mentioned before. I was almost 15 when Moses came to live with us, and I remember our parents explaining to me why it was important to keep the adoption a secret. They didn't want him to feel different or be bullied. At the time, it seemed sensible, so I agreed to keep it a secret. I feel really regretful that I did. Moses talks to me about feeling different from the rest of the family, and I would reply with things like, "No, it's normal to feel that way when you're young," etc. Looking back, I recognize this is almost gaslighting him, and I feel truly guilty about it. I never really questioned it until about 2 years ago. Then I started to unpack it in my mind, but to be completely honest, I felt guilty and repressed it. However, it kept resurfacing. I did some research into adoption and the trauma it can cause children, even those who can't remember being adopted. I have no expertise in psychology and don't claim to be an expert, but this is what I have gathered from my own research. On one hand, telling him could worsen his relationship with our parents. On the other hand, I feel like it can't be hidden from him forever, not successfully. I want to fool myself into thinking it could improve their relationship, but I don't see how it could. However, it would give him the satisfaction of knowing he isn't crazy for feeling different. The more I thought about it, the more I started to resent my parents for forcing me into this role of lying to Moses. I began to avoid contact with them to the point where they noticed. When I spoke to them about how I felt, they told me I couldn't tell Moses, insisting it would make everything worse for him. They also said that if I told him, they would go no contact with me and make it incredibly difficult for me to have contact with Moses. Is telling him the right thing to do, or am I just being selfish? I feel like I'm lying all the time now. Update 1. So, before telling him, I got in contact with my friend, who is a social worker. I asked him what social services would do if my brother decided to come live with me against my parents' wishes. He told me that since Moses is at the awkward age of 13, it would be a toss-up on whether they would listen to my brother and allow him to stay or force him to move back with our parents. He advised me that my parents have parental responsibility, so if they really pushed, Moses would be moved back. However, if the social worker felt Moses was in any way unsafe, for example, if Moses said he would run away again if brought back home, they would likely leave him living with me temporarily. I decided to give my parents a final chance, tell him the truth, or I will. They told me, in no uncertain terms, that they will never tell him he's adopted. If I do, they will go no contact with me. I said I would rather they tell him. I don't want to be the one to tell him, but I believe he has a right to know. They outright refused. Moses normally walks home from school, so instead, yesterday I went to pick him up. I told him we needed to talk. I said that Mom and Dad wouldn't like that I was telling him this, but I believed he had a right to know. I explained the whole situation to him, how he was adopted when he was around 1.5, how I didn't know much about his background or where he was before he lived with us, and how I was 15 at the time and believed Mom and Dad when they said it would be best for him not to know. I told him I understood if he was angry at me and that I would take him home if he wanted. He was clearly in shock but asked to come to my house. He didn't speak at all during the drive home. When we got to my place, he just went into his room and stayed quiet. I was worried and wasn't sure if I had done the right thing. He came out maybe an hour later and asked me so many questions. I tried my best to answer them but told him I didn't know a lot. I said I would support him in asking Mom and Dad. He said he didn't want to talk to them and sent them a text saying he was staying at my house for the weekend, something he normally does, so it wasn't unusual. We put on a film, and things were a little tense, but honestly, I expected more from him. He was so quiet. He went to bed early, and I was so worried. I checked on him about every 90 minutes. This morning, Moses seemed more like his normal self. He said he was thankful that I told him. I asked him what he wanted to do, assuring him I would support him no matter what he chose. Whether he wanted to confront Mom and Dad or stay with me for as long as he needed, I was there for him. He said he just wanted to process everything. I asked if he had spoken to Mom or Dad, and he said that besides letting them know he was here, he hadn't. We played Fortnite together all day today, and he hasn't brought it up again. However, he's acting like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders. I thought this news would make him sad, but it seems like he's relieved. He's asleep now, and while I'm worried about how our parents will react, I'm glad Moses knows the truth. It seems like things are working out okay so far, and I hope they continue to do so. Update 2. I wanted to give an update on the situation since my last post. First off, thank you to everyone who reached out with advice and support. After I told Moses the truth, I was really worried about how he would process everything and what it would mean for our relationship and his relationship with our parents moving forward. Moses stayed with me the whole weekend, and I tried to maintain a sense of normality. I could tell he was processing everything, but, thankfully, he still seemed relieved to know the truth. Last night, we had a long conversation. He told me again about how he had always felt different and out of place and never really understood why. He said knowing he's adopted gave him a sense of clarity. He is unsure how he feels about our parents, and I'm trying to support him without pushing him in any one direction. Moses asked me to tell our parents that I had told him. Honestly, I didn't want them to know yet, but I'm following his wishes. Predictably, they did not take the news well. They were furious, accusing me of betraying them and purposefully ruining their relationship because I was jealous. I wanted to say they were doing fine at ruining their relationship without me, but I bit my tongue. I told them it was the right thing to do, but they didn't listen. They kept saying that keeping the adoption a secret was the best way to protect Moses and that revealing the truth would only harm him and destabilize the family. I told them that Moses already had a sense that something was off, and continuing the lie would do nothing but deepen his sense of alienation. During the argument, something one of the commenters said started to nag at me. I asked them directly if I was also adopted. It was like they froze. They didn't say anything for a good 30 seconds, and when they did, they just dismissed what I said. But I could feel something was different. I'm considering taking a DNA test to put my mind at ease, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do now when I should be focusing on Moses. Today, Moses tried to go home after school. Our parents locked the doors and wouldn't let him in. They ignored him knocking on the doors and have also ignored his text messages. He came back to my place, clearly upset and confused. Moses is such a good kid that I think he was willing to just move on, but now that they've locked him out, he feels incredibly hurt and rejected. I can't understand why they would do that to him. I can understand them doing it to me, but not to him. Commenter. I went through Op's comment history, and it 100% sounds like Op and Moses were kidnapped as kids, as others are saying. This is all complete speculation, of course. 1. They were so staunchly against either of them knowing they were adopted because if they did, the natural next question would be, where are my birth parents? They would probably also want to see the paperwork that accompanies a legal adoption. 2. They apparently don't believe in therapy or mental health. This, to me, indicates they're probably not good people, as I've yet to meet a good person who believes that. It may also suggest that one or both of them have some mental health diagnosis leading to their negativity and refusal to accept anything related to therapy. 3. They seem to really like not rocking the boat, so to speak. If they do have diagnosed issues, or issues they don't want examined too closely, this could be the barrier between them and obtaining children via proper adoptions, which might explain why they resorted to kidnapping. It could also be a tactic to discourage Op and Moses from seeking therapy. They sound awful, and again, they don't want to rock the boat and risk losing control over either of them. 4. The only mention of a social worker is Op's friend. I assume Moses would have had one initially if the adoption was legitimate. 5. The grandparents apparently don't talk about it, and nobody outside the family, presumably they mean the immediate family, knows. Not wanting to talk to Moses about it is one thing, but not discussing Moses being adopted with Op or anything related to that either? Maybe they are also afraid of Op figuring things out. 6. In addition, now that Moses knows, they've cut contact even with him. Maybe, in their minds, now that he knows, they can't pretend otherwise. Or perhaps they want to hide from the guilt of knowing what they did, or to protect themselves from when the questions start getting asked. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move or disappear before things get worse, and it's harder to do that with a kid you want to leave behind living with you. All of this is complete speculation and could very easily be complete nonsense. A lot can also be explained in other ways. Either way, speculation is fun.